The morning sun streamed through the blinds of a small apartment on the east side of the city. Dion's eyes snapped open before his alarm even had a chance to sound. Today was the day that could change everything for him. He climbed out of bed and padded across the worn carpet to the bathroom. The mirror reflected back a young face filled with equal parts hope and anxiety. Dion had graduated from State University 3 months ago with a degree in computer science, but the real world had been much harder to crack than he'd expected. Today will be different, he told his reflection as he splashed cold water on his face. It has to be. The interview at Horizon Enterprises wasn't just another job opportunity, it was the opportunity. A starting position that paid enough to help with his mountain of student loans and had actual room to grow. In the tech world, Horizon was known as one of those rare companies that still believed in developing talent from within. Dion's phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Praying for you today, baby." "You've got this." A smile spread across his face. His mom had worked 2 jobs to help him get through school. She believed in him even when the world seemed determined to shut doors in his face. 47 job applications, 12 responses, 3 interviews, 0 offers. Until now, until Horizon had called. In the kitchen, Dion made himself a quick breakfast of eggs and toast. He couldn't afford to skip meals today. He needed his brain firing on all cylinders. As he ate, he reviewed the company information on his tablet one more time. Founded by Walter Richardson 30 years ago, Horizon had grown from a small startup to one of the most innovative firms in the industry. After breakfast, Dion opened his closet and pulled out the garment bag containing his only suit, navy blue, purchased for his college graduation with money he'd saved from his campus job. He'd stayed up late pressing it to perfection, making sure every crease was sharp and every thread was in place. First impressions matter, his uncle had always told him, especially for guys like us. As he knotted his tie, Dion rehearsed potential interview questions aloud. "Why do you want to work at Horizon?" "Because your company's commitment to innovation aligns perfectly with my passion for creating solutions that actually help people." "What's your greatest weakness?" "I sometimes get so focused on solving a problem that I lose track of time, but I've learned to set milestones to stay on schedule." "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" "Contributing to Horizon's growth as a senior developer while mentoring newer team members, just as I hope to be mentored." Satisfied with his appearance, Dion gathered his portfolio, which included printouts of his best coding projects and letters of recommendation from professors. He checked his watch, 6:45 a.m. His interview wasn't until 9. But he'd planned to arrive by 8:30. The bus route could be unpredictable, and today of all days he couldn't risk being late. Before leaving, Dion paused at the small table by the door where a framed photograph stood, himself as a child sitting on his grandfather's lap. The old man had passed away 2 years ago, but his words still echoed in Dion's mind. "Technical skills will get you in the door, but it's character that keeps you in the room." "I won't let you down, Grandpa," Dion whispered, touching the frame gently. With a deep breath, he opened the door and stepped out into the world, his heart pounding with anticipation. The morning air was cool and fresh, carrying the promise of new beginnings. Birds sang in the trees lining his street, and the neighborhood was just beginning to stir with activity. As he walked to the bus stop, Dion mentally reviewed his journey to this moment. The countless late nights studying while his friends were out having fun. The weekends spent building his portfolio instead of relaxing. The networking events where he'd stood awkwardly in corners, gathering courage to introduce himself to industry professionals who often looked right through him. The bus stop was 4 blocks from his apartment, and Dion arrived with plenty of time to spare. He sat on the bench, portfolio clutched tightly in his hands, watching the early morning traffic begin to build. A construction worker nodded at him as he passed. A woman walked her dog on the opposite sidewalk. The world was going about its regular Tuesday, unaware that for Dion nothing about this day was ordinary. He checked his bus tracking app, 7 minutes until the 7:15 bus would arrive. That would get him downtown by 8:10, giving him plenty of time to find the Horizon building and collect himself before the interview. Dion closed his eyes briefly, centering his thoughts. "I am prepared," he said to himself. "I am capable. I belong in that room." The sound of a car horn blaring nearby broke his concentration. Dion opened his eyes just as an elderly man stepped off the curb across the street. seemingly unaware of the taxi speeding toward him. The taxi swerved at the last second, missing the man but causing him to stumble backward, dropping 2 large paper grocery bags he'd been carrying. Cans rolled into the street. Fruit scattered across the sidewalk. A carton of eggs smashed open on the pavement. Dion looked around, expecting someone closer to help, but the few people nearby hurried past, eyes averted or locked on their phones. The old man stood there looking down at his spilled groceries with a defeated expression that hit Dion right in the chest. He glanced at his watch. Soon his bus would arrive in 2 minutes. If he missed it, the next one wouldn't come for 20 minutes. He might still make it to the interview on time, but it would be cutting it close, very close. Dion looked back at the old man, who was now painfully bending down to retrieve a rolling apple, his movements slow and stiff. Something about his dignified struggle reminded Dion of his grandfather in his final years. The digital sign at the bus stop flashed an update. Route 42, arriving in 1 minute. Dion had a choice to make. Dion looked at his watch again, then back at the elderly man struggling to gather his scattered groceries. With a deep breath, he stood up from the bus stop bench and crossed the street. "Let me help you with that, sir," Dion said, kneeling down to pick up a can of soup that had rolled toward the gutter. The old man looked up, surprise evident in his weathered face. He had kind eyes, deep brown with crow's feet at the corners, and silver hair that contrasted sharply with his dark skin. "Thank you, young man," he said, his voice carrying the gentle rasp of age. "These old bones don't bend like they used to." Behind Dion, he heard the distinctive hiss of the bus's brakes as it pulled up to the stop he had just left. He forced himself not to look back, focusing instead on gathering the scattered groceries. "I'm Richard," the elderly man said, offering his hand once Dion had collected an armful of items. "Dion," he replied, shifting the groceries to shake Richard's hand. It felt small but strong in his grasp. "You're dressed mighty fine for grocery shopping," Richard observed, noting Dion's suit with an appreciative glance. Dion smiled, despite the knot forming in his stomach. "I have a job interview this morning. At Horizon Enterprises." Richard's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's quite a company. Important interview, then." "Yes, sir. Very important." They finished gathering what they could salvage from the spill. The eggs were a lost cause, and a few apples had been bruised beyond saving, but most items were intact. The problem now was that one of the paper bags had torn completely down the side. "I don't live far," Richard said, sensing Dion's dilemma. "Just 2 blocks up and 1 over. If you could help me get these home, I'd be mighty grateful." Dion hesitated, looking down the street where his bus was now pulling away. The next one would come at 7:35. If everything went perfectly after that, no traffic, no delays, he might still make it to Horizon by 8:45. Cutting it close but doable. But as he looked at Richard, who was now trying to balance his remaining groceries in one arm while leaning on a cane with the other, Dion knew he couldn't just walk away. "I'd be happy to help you get these home," he said, taking the intact bag from Richard's arm and carefully holding the torn one from the bottom. Relief washed over the old man's face. "You're a good young man. Not many people would stop these days. Everyone's in such a hurry." They walked slowly, Richard setting the pace with his careful steps. As they moved, he asked Dion about his interview. "What position are you applying for at Horizon?" "Junior software developer," Dion replied. "I graduated 3 months ago with a degree in computer science, but the job market is challenging." Richard nodded thoughtfully. "It always is. What makes you want to work at Horizon specifically?" Something about the question felt like a test, though Dion couldn't say why. He answered honestly. "They're one of the few companies still creating technology that actually helps ordinary people. Their accessibility software has changed lives for people with disabilities. Plus," he added with a small smile, "they're known for actually promoting from within rather than just saying they do." Richard chuckled. "Done your homework, I see. My grandpa always said preparation shows respect, for yourself and for others. Smart man. Your grandfather." They turned onto a tree-lined street with older homes, most well-maintained but showing their age. Richard stopped in front of a modest 2-story house with a small but neat front garden. "This is me," he said, gesturing toward the front door. Dion followed him up the 3 steps to the porch, balancing the groceries carefully. Richard fumbled slightly with his keys before opening the door. Inside, the house was clean and orderly, filled with books and what looked Ed like hand-carved wooden figurines. Photos lined the mantelpiece, children and grandchildren, Dion guessed, and the furniture was well-worn but good quality. "The kitchen's through here," Richard said, leading the way. Dion set the groceries on the counter and began helping unpack them. As he did, he noticed the time on the microwave clock, 7:28, "Sir, I hate to rush off, but I should get back to the bus stop if I want to make my interview." Richard glanced at him with an expression Dion couldn't quite read. "Of course, don't let me keep you, but would you mind helping me with one more thing before you go? The cereal and canned goods need to go on the top shelf, and these days reaching up there is almost as hard as bending down." Dion looked at the clock again, then at the sincere need in Richard's eyes. The old man reminded him so much of his grandfather in those final years, proud but increasingly aware of his limitations. "No problem at all," he said, pushing thoughts of the interview temporarily aside. As he helped organize the pantry, Richard asked more questions about Dion's background, his studies, and his career goals. Unlike the small talk Dion was used to, Richard seemed genuinely interested in his answers. "I built an app for my senior project," Dion explained as he arranged cans on the shelf. "It helps connect low-income families with local food resources, food banks, community gardens, discount programs. Shows what's available in real time within walking distance or public transit routes." "Impressive," Richard said. "Did it work well?" "It did. Several community centers in my hometown are still using it. I wanted to build something that would actually help people where I grew up." "And that's not the kind of thing that impresses employers?" Dion shrugged. "Some seem to prefer candidates who built something with more commercial potential." When the groceries were put away, Dion glanced at the time again. 7:42. He'd already missed the 7:35 bus. The next one would come at 7:55, getting him downtown around 8:50 at best. His heart sank. There was no way he'd make it to the interview on time now. "I should get going," he said, trying to keep disappointment from his voice. "Is there anything else you need help with before I leave?" Richard studied him for a moment, then seemed to make a decision. "Actually, there is one more thing. My grandson set up my new phone last week, but I can't figure out how to add contacts to it. Would you mind showing me? It would only take a minute." Dion knew it was hopeless now. Even if he ran to the bus stop, he'd be late to the interview. He might as well help Richard completely before leaving. "I'd be happy to show you," he said, pushing away thoughts of what this missed opportunity would cost him. Richard smiled and went to retrieve his phone from the living room. As Dion waited, he pulled out his own phone. He should at least call Horizon and explain why he wouldn't make the interview. Maybe they would reschedule. He dialed the number from the email he'd received confirming his appointment. After 2 rings, a crisp, professional voice answered. "Horizon Enterprises, how may I direct your call?" "Hello," Dion said, trying to sound confident. "My name is Dion Taylor. I have an interview scheduled for 9 a.m. today, but I'm calling to let you know I'm going to be late." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I see. May I ask the reason for your tardiness, Mr. Taylor?" Dion hesitated. Would the truth sound like an excuse? "I stopped to help an elderly man whose groceries had spilled on the street. By the time we got everything to his house, I had missed my bus. I'm very sorry, but I wanted to let you know rather than just showing up late." Another pause. "I appreciate your call, Mr. Taylor, but I'm afraid our policy on interview appointments is quite strict. We have a full schedule of candidates today. Perhaps you could reapply in 6 months when another round of positions opens." Dion's heart sank. "I understand. Thank you for your time." He ended the call just as Richard returned with his phone. The old man must have read something in Dion's expression because he asked, "Everything all right, son?" Dion forced a smile. "Yes, sir. Now let's take a look at adding contacts to your phone." Dion sat on Richard's sofa, showing him how to add contacts to his smartphone. The disappointment of missing his interview still stung, but he focused on explaining the process clearly and patiently. "So you tap here first," Dion demonstrated. "Then you can enter the person's name and number. Let's try adding my contact information as an example." Richard watched attentively, his eyes narrowing as he concentrated. "Technology moves too fast these days," he said with a small shake of his head. "Just when I think I've figured something out, everything changes again." "I know what you mean," Dion said with a smile. "My grandma used to say the same thing. She never could get the hang of texting." After entering his information, Dion handed the phone back to Richard. "Now you try adding a contact yourself." Richard took the phone and slowly followed the steps Dion had shown him. His fingers moved carefully across the screen, but he managed to create a new contact without help. "Look at that," he said with a satisfied smile. "Old dogs and new tricks after all." Dion checked his watch. It was nearly 8:30 now. The interview opportunity was definitely gone, but somehow he found it hard to regret his decision. There would be other interviews, maybe not at prestigious companies like Horizon, but somewhere. "I should probably get going," Dion said, standing up from the couch. Richard nodded, but then winced slightly as he tried to stand as well. Dion noticed and immediately offered his hand. "Are you all right, sir?" Richard waved off his concern. "Just these old knees. Had surgery on my right hip last month and I'm still not moving quite right. The doctor says I should be using a walker, but—" He gestured dismissively. "Pride is a foolish thing sometimes." "Is that why you were out getting groceries by yourself?" Dion asked, concerned. "My usual delivery service had some mix-up with their system. When I called to ask about my order, they said it would be another 3 days. He shrugged. "A man needs to eat." Dion looked around the living room, noticing details he'd missed before. A walker was tucked discreetly in the corner. A pillow and blanket were arranged on the couch, suggesting Richard had been sleeping downstairs to avoid the stairs. And now that he thought about it, the groceries Richard had been carrying were basic necessities. Bread, milk, eggs, canned soup, cereal? "Mr. Richard," Dion said slowly, "do you have someone checking in on you while you're recovering?" A shadow passed over the old man's face. "My daughter calls every day. She lives about 2 hours away with her family. My neighbor brings in my mail." He paused. "It's enough." But Dion could see it wasn't. His own grandfather had been the same way, fiercely independent, reluctant to ask for help even when he needed it. "Sir, I have a thought. I've already missed my interview, and I don't have anywhere else to be today. What if I helped you out for a few hours? We could replace those eggs you lost, and I could help with any other tasks you've been putting off because of your hip." Richard looked surprised, then skeptical. "You'd do that? For a stranger?" "You're not exactly a stranger anymore," Dion pointed out. "Besides, my grandpa always said that kindness given is never wasted." A slow smile spread across Richard's face. "Your grandfather sounds like a wise man. I would appreciate the help if you're sure." For the next few hours, Dion became Richard's unofficial assistant. They made a list of tasks that needed doing, and Dion set to work. He replaced the broken eggs and bruised fruit using money Richard insisted on giving him. He changed a light bulb in the hallway that had been out for weeks. He carried laundry down from the upstairs bedroom and started a load in the washing machine. While they worked, or rather while Dion worked and Richard supervised, they talked. Richard told stories about his life, his 40-year career as an engineer, his late wife Dorothy, who had been a mathematics professor, his 2 children and 5 grandchildren. In turn, Dion shared his own story, growing up in a single-parent household, his passion for computers that started when his school received a donation of used laptops, his dreams of creating software that would make a difference in people's lives. "You remind me of myself at your age," Richard said, as they sat down to a simple lunch Dion had prepared. "Full of ideas and determination. Was it easier back then?" Dion asked. "Breaking into your field, I mean." Richard considered this. Different challenges. There weren't as many people with engineering degrees competing for positions, but there were other barriers. He gave Dion a meaningful look. Dion nodded, understanding what remained unsaid. Some things hadn't changed as much as people liked to pretend. After lunch, Dion helped Richard organize his medication. The pill organizer had been empty for days because Richard couldn't read the small print on the prescription bottles anymore. "You should have one of those magnifying glasses for reading these labels," Dion said as he squinted at the dosage instructions. "There's one around here somewhere," Richard admitted. "I just can't remember where I put it." Dion made a note to look for it before he left. As the afternoon went on, Dion found himself enjoying Richard's company. The old man had a sharp mind and a dry sense of humor, and he seemed genuinely interested in Dion's ideas about technology. When Dion mentioned his app for connecting low-income families with food resources, Richard asked detailed questions about how it worked. The real challenge was making it useful for people who might not be very tech-savvy, Dion explained. "I wanted something my own mom could use easily after a long day of work. That's the essence of good design. Richard nodded approvingly. Understanding who will actually use your product and what their real needs are. Around 3 p.m., after they'd finished a game of chess, which Richard won handily, Dion noticed the time. I should probably head out soon, he said, helping Richard back to his armchair. Is there anything else you need before I go? Richard seemed hesitant. You've already done more than enough, son, but... He paused. Would you mind bringing the clothes from the dryer upstairs? I can fold them myself, but the stairs are still difficult. Of course, Dion said, heading to the laundry room. As he gathered the warm clothes from the dryer, he reflected on the day. Missing the interview at Horizon was a setback, no doubt about it. His mom would be disappointed when he told her, though she'd understand his reasons. He'd have to start applying for jobs again tomorrow, maybe look into some smaller companies that might be more flexible with their hiring process. But despite everything, Dion didn't regret his choice. Helping Richard had felt right in a way that was hard to explain. His grandfather would have approved, and that meant something to him. When he brought the laundry upstairs, he found Richard's bedroom easily enough. It was neat and orderly, with more family photographs on the dresser. As he set the laundry basket on the bed, Dion noticed a framed photograph on the nightstand that made him pause. It was Richard, looking about 20 years younger, shaking hands with someone who looked vaguely familiar. They were standing in front of a building with the Horizon Enterprises logo clearly visible. Dion picked up the frame for a closer look, his heart suddenly beating faster. Find everything all right up there? Richard called from downstairs. Yes, sir, Dion answered, setting the photo back down carefully. I'll be right down. When he returned to the living room, Richard was looking through his wallet. He pulled out a $20 bill and held it out to Dion. For your help today, he explained, and for the bus fare you spent coming back with my groceries. Dion shook his head firmly. I can't take your money, Mr. Richard. I was happy to help. Richard studied him for a long moment, then put the money back in his wallet. As you wish, but I do want to thank you properly. No thanks needed, Dion assured him. I'm just glad I could help out. Richard nodded slowly, then reached for his phone, the one Dion had just taught him to use. Before you go, would you mind giving me your phone number, in case I need help again sometime? Of course, Dion said, dictating his number as Richard carefully entered it into his contacts. And your email address? Richard asked. Just in case? Dion provided that as well, thinking it was sweet that the old man wanted to stay in touch. As he prepared to leave, Dion hesitated at the door. The photo upstairs was still on his mind. Mr. Richard, he began cautiously, I couldn't help noticing a photograph in your bedroom. It looked like you were at Horizon Enterprises. A small smile played at the corners of Richard's mouth. Did it now? Do you know people at Horizon? Richard's smile widened. You could say that. There was something in his expression that made Dion suddenly suspicious. Sir, who exactly are you? Richard's eyes twinkled with mischief. Just an old man who's very grateful for your help today, and who might have a few friends in interesting places. Dion wasn't sure what to make of this cryptic response, but he had a strange feeling that this wasn't the last he'd be hearing from Richard. Well, he said, extending his hand, it was nice meeting you, sir. Please take care of yourself, and use that walker the doctor gave you. Richard chuckled as he shook Dion's hand. I'll consider it, and Dion, don't give up on your dreams just yet. Sometimes life takes unexpected turns. With those mysterious words hanging in the air, Dion stepped out onto the porch, wondering what Richard meant, and who he really was. 3 days passed, and Dion tried not to dwell on the missed opportunity at Horizon. He spent his mornings applying for other positions and his afternoons helping his mom at her daycare center. He thought about Richard occasionally, hoping the old man was managing all right on his own. On Friday morning, Dion's phone rang while he was updating his resume. The number wasn't one he recognized. Hello? He answered, balancing the phone between his ear and shoulder as he continued typing. Is this Dion Taylor? A woman's crisp, professional voice came through the speaker. Yes, this is he. Mr. Taylor, my name is Amara Williams. I'm calling from Horizon Enterprises. Dion's fingers froze above his keyboard. Oh, hello. We'd like to invite you to come in for a meeting this afternoon at 2 p.m. Would that be possible? Dion's mind raced. A meeting? After he'd missed his interview? Was this some kind of second chance? Yes, ma'am. I can definitely be there at 2, Excellent. Please ask for me at the reception desk when you arrive. She provided the address, the same downtown office building where his interview had been scheduled, and ended the call. Dion sat back in his chair, stunned. What had just happened? Had someone at Horizon reconsidered his application despite his no-show? It seemed unlikely. Maybe they were just giving him a courtesy meeting to explain why he wouldn't be considered for future positions. Whatever the reason, Dion wasn't going to miss this opportunity. He immediately checked the bus schedule, planning to arrive at least 30 minutes early this time. No chances. He pressed his suit again, polished his shoes, and practiced his explanation for missing the interview. The truth, told simply and without excuses. His mother noticed his preparations when she returned from her morning shift at the daycare. Another interview? She asked hopefully. Sort of, Dion explained the strange call. I'm not sure what they want, but I'm going to find out. She squeezed his shoulder. Whatever happens, I'm proud of you. For the interview and for helping that old man. Your heart's always been in the right place. Dion arrived at the Horizon building at 1:25 p.m., giving himself plenty of time to go through security and find the right floor. The lobby was impressive, all gleaming marble and glass with a large display showcasing the company's most successful products. At the reception desk, he gave his name and mentioned Amara Williams. The receptionist smiled and made a quick call. Ms. Williams will be right down to get you, Mr. Taylor. Please have a seat. Dion sat on one of the sleek leather couches, his portfolio on his lap. Around him, employees and visitors moved with purpose. He felt simultaneously out of place and exactly where he wanted to be. 5 minutes later, a tall woman with a neat twist hairstyle approached him. Mr. Taylor, I'm Amara Williams, HR Director at Horizon. Thank you for coming in today. Dion stood quickly, extending his hand. Thank you for inviting me, Ms. Williams. Please follow me, she said after a firm handshake. We'll be meeting in one of our conference rooms. As they rode the elevator to the 30th floor, Dion gathered his courage. Ms. Williams, I want to apologize for missing my interview earlier this week. She held up a hand, stopping him. Let's save that discussion for the meeting, shall we? Her expression revealed nothing, and Dion's anxiety ratcheted up another notch. This was starting to feel like being called to the principal's office. The elevator doors opened onto a floor buzzing with activity. Employees worked at sleek workstations, some engaged in animated discussions around whiteboards covered in code and diagrams. This was where the magic happened, where ideas became products that changed lives. Ms. Williams led him past this hub of activity to a hallway lined with meeting rooms. She stopped at one labeled Boardroom C and opened the door. After you, she said. Dion stepped into a large conference room with a polished table that could seat at least 20 people. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the city. But Dion barely noticed any of this because his attention was immediately drawn to the single person sitting at the far end of the table. Richard, not Richard the frail, elderly man who needed help with his groceries. This was Richard sitting straight-backed in an expensive suit, a laptop open in front of him, looking completely at home in the executive boardroom of Horizon Enterprises. Their eyes met, and Richard smiled, the same warm smile from 3 days ago, but now it carried a completely different meaning. Hello, Dion, Richard said, gesturing to a chair near him. Please have a seat. Dion moved forward on autopilot, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. You seem surprised, Richard observed as Dion sat down. Yes, sir, I am. Ms. Williams took a seat on Richard's other side. Mr. Taylor, allow me to properly introduce you to Richard Richardson, founder and CEO of Horizon Enterprises. Dion felt like the floor had disappeared beneath him. Richard, his Richard from the grocery spill, was Walter Richardson? The Walter Richardson? You're the founder of Horizon? Dion managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper. Richard, or rather Mr. Richardson, nodded. For 35 years now. Though these days I spend more time in an advisory capacity and less in day-to-day operations. Dion's mind was spinning. But your name? You told me your name was Richard. It is. Richard Walter Richardson. Most people call me Walter in professional settings to avoid confusion. But my friends and family have always called me Richard. Dion thought back to the photograph he'd seen in Richard's bedroom. Richard shaking hands with someone in front of the Horizon building. That someone must have been another executive or business partner. The photo hadn't been of Richard at Horizon. It had been of Walter Richardson at his company. So that day when I helped you with your groceries was entirely coincidental, Richard finished for him. I truly did have hip surgery last month. My usual grocery delivery service really did have a system error, and I genuinely did need help when those bags split open. Dion shook his head in disbelief. And my interview that morning, was it supposed to be with you? No, Ms. Williams interjected. Your interview was with our technical team for the junior developer position. Mr. Richardson isn't usually involved in that level of hiring. But I'm very interested in who joins our company, Richard added. Which brings us to why you're here today. Dion sat up straighter, trying to gather his composure. Sir, I want to apologize for missing the interview. I called to explain, but Richard waved his hand dismissively. Yes, I know all about that. Amara has kept me informed. He leaned forward. What I want to know is why you did it. Why I missed the interview. Why you stopped to help me, a stranger, even though it meant potentially missing an important opportunity. Dion thought about it, then answered honestly. It was the right thing to do. You needed help and I was there. Even knowing what it might cost you professionally, I didn't really think about it that way in the moment. I just saw someone who needed help. Richard exchanged a glance with Ms. Williams. And after you realized you'd missed your bus, you could have just helped me pick up the groceries and left. You couldn't have carried all that by yourself, especially not up those stairs, Dion pointed out. And once I was there, well, you reminded me of my grandfather. I'd have wanted someone to help him if he needed it. Richard nodded slowly, then turned to Ms. Williams. What did our technical team say about his application materials? Ms. Williams opened a folder that had been sitting on the table. Very impressive academic record. Excellent recommendations from professors. The portfolio projects show creativity and technical skill. The team was particularly interested in his food resource application. Practical, community-focused, and well-executed. And yet we almost missed out on him because of our rigid interview policies, Richard mused. He turned back to Dion. Do you know why I started this company, Dion? The question caught him off guard. To develop innovative technology solutions according to your website. Richard smiled. That's the what, not the why. I started Horizon because I believed technology should serve humanity, not the other way around. I wanted to create tools that make people's lives better, especially for those who might otherwise be left behind by technological advances. He closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair. Over the years, I've learned that technical skills are relatively common. What's rare is finding people who combine those skills with genuine empathy and character. People who understand that what we build is ultimately for human beings, not just consumers or users, but people with real needs and challenges. Dion nodded, beginning to understand where this was going. When I saw how you helped me, not just picking up the groceries, but taking me home, making sure I had what I needed, even showing me how to use my phone, I saw something special, something Horizon needs more of. Ms. Williams slid a document across the table toward Dion. This is a job offer, Mr. Taylor, not for the junior developer position you originally applied for, but for our innovation incubator program. Dion looked down at the paper, barely comprehending what he was seeing. The innovation incubator was Horizon's prestigious development program for promising new talent, a position usually reserved for graduates from top-tier universities, or those with years of experience. This position comes with a higher salary than the junior role, plus mentorship from our senior engineering team. Ms. Williams continued. You would rotate through several departments over the next year, giving you exposure to different aspects of our business before settling into a permanent role. But why? Dion asked, still stunned. Because I helped you with your groceries? Richard shook his head. Because you demonstrated the kind of character and judgment we value at Horizon. Technical skills can be taught. Engineering principles can be learned. But empathy, integrity, kindness, these qualities are either part of who you are or they aren't. He leaned forward, his eyes serious. I've built my company on the belief that how we treat people matters just as much as what we can create. Your actions showed me exactly the kind of person you are, Dion. The kind of person I want at Horizon. Ms. Williams smiled. We've called your references since then, of course. They all confirmed what Mr. Richardson observed firsthand. Your professors spoke particularly highly of how you helped other students who were struggling, even when you were busy with your own projects. Dayon looked down at the offer letter again, this time taking in the details. The salary was nearly twice what he'd expected from an entry-level position. The benefits were comprehensive. The opportunity was beyond anything he'd dared to hope for. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. Richard extended his hand across the table. "Say yes, Dayon. Come build something meaningful with us." Dayon took the offered hand, feeling like his life had just changed in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. "Yes, sir." "I'd be honored." Richard's smile widened. "Excellent. Amara will take you through the details and paperwork. You'll start on Monday." He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "And Dayon? My driver will be picking me up after my doctor's appointment next Thursday. I'd appreciate it if you'd join me for lunch. I have some ideas I'd like to discuss with you about expanding that food resource app of yours." "I'd like that very much, sir," Dayon replied, still trying to process everything that had happened. As Richard left the room, Ms. Williams smiled at Dayon's shell-shocked expression. "Welcome to Horizon, Mr. Taylor. I think you'll find that coincidences like the one that brought you here today are just the beginning of an extraordinary journey." 6 months later, Dayon stood in the lobby of Horizon Enterprises, watching as a group of visitors marveled at the newest addition to the company's product showcase. A large interactive display demonstrated the Community Connect application, an expanded version of Dayon's college project, now backed by Horizon's resources and reach. "Impressive, isn't it?" a familiar voice said beside him. Dayon turned to see Richard approaching, leaning slightly on a sleek carbon fiber cane that had replaced his temporary walker. The CEO moved more easily these days, his recovery from hip surgery nearly complete. "It's surreal," Dayon admitted, looking back at the display where a mother with 2 children was testing the app's interface. "Sometimes I can't believe this is really happening," Richard chuckled. "Believe it, son. Your idea is already helping thousands of families across 5 cities. By this time next year, we're projecting it will be in use nationwide." The Community Connect platform had evolved from Dayon's original concept. It still connected low-income families with food resources, but now included additional features, transportation options to reach those resources, job listings in the user's area, affordable childcare programs, and educational opportunities. All accessible through a simple, intuitive interface designed for users with limited tech experience. "The development team deserves most of the credit," Dayon said. "They took my basic framework and transformed it into something much more powerful. A good idea with the right support can change the world," Richard said. "But don't sell yourself short. Your insights into the needs of the communities we're trying to serve have been invaluable." As part of the Innovation Incubator program, Dayon had spent his first 6 months rotating through different departments at Horizon. He'd contributed to various projects, learned from experienced mentors, and impressed everyone with his technical skills and fresh perspective. But it was his original app concept that had captured Richard's imagination and ultimately became his primary focus. "The user testing from the Atlanta rollout came back yesterday," Dayon said. 92% of participants rated the app very useful or essential, and the food bank partners reported a 30% increase in resource utilization. Richard nodded approvingly. "Numbers like that get attention. The board has officially greenlit the next phase of expansion." He glanced at his watch. "Speaking of which, we should head upstairs. Everyone's waiting." Today marked a milestone for the Community Connect project and for Dayon personally. He would be presenting the expansion plan to Horizon's executive leadership team, outlining how the platform could be scaled to serve more communities across the country. As they rode the elevator to the 30th floor, Dayon felt a flutter of nervousness. 6 months ago, he couldn't have imagined standing in front of a room full of executives presenting his own vision for a company-backed initiative. "Nervous?" Richard asked, seeming to read his thoughts. "A little," Dayon admitted. "It's a big room. Remember what I told you when you presented to the product team last month?" Dayon smiled. "You said to forget about impressing anyone and focus on the people who will actually use what we're building." "Exactly. The suits in that boardroom aren't your audience. The single mother working 2 jobs who needs to find affordable food for her kids, she's your audience. The elderly man on a fixed income who can't drive to the grocery store, he's your audience. Speak for them." The elevator doors opened and they walked toward the main conference room, Through the glass walls, Dion could see that the room was already filled with Horizon's top executives and project leads. "Just one more thing before we go in," Richard said, stopping Dion with a gentle hand on his arm. "I want you to know how proud I am of what you've accomplished these past 6 months. Not just with this project, but with how you've carried yourself throughout the company." Dion felt a warm flush of gratitude. Richard had become more than just his boss. He'd become a mentor and in many ways the grandfather figure Dion had lost years ago. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot coming from you. You've made quite an impression around here," Richard continued. "The technical teams respect your skills. The product people value your insights. And the community outreach division practically worships the ground you walk on." Dion laughed. "I wouldn't go that far, I would. Which is why, after your presentation today, I'm going to announce that you'll be heading up the new Community Solutions Division as its director." Dion stared at him in shock. "Director? But I've only been with the company for 6 months. 6 months in which you've demonstrated exactly the qualities Horizon needs in its leadership. Technical excellence, yes, but more importantly, a genuine understanding of the human impact of what we do." Richard smiled. Besides, who better to lead this initiative than the person whose vision inspired it? Before Dion could respond, Ms. Williams opened the conference room door. "We're ready for you, gentlemen." Richard gave Dion an encouraging nod. "Ready to change some lives?" Taking a deep breath, Dion straightened his shoulders and followed Richard into the boardroom. The next hour passed in a blur of slides, questions, and discussions. Dion presented the Community Connect expansion plan with clarity and passion, addressing each question with thoughtful responses backed by data and real-world examples. When he finished, the room erupted in applause. True to his word, Richard then announced Dion's promotion to director of the newly formed Community Solutions Division. The news was met with enthusiastic approval from the executive team. As the meeting concluded and people began filing out, several executives stopped to congratulate Dion and express support for the project. "That was quite a presentation," said the Chief Technology Officer, shaking Dion's hand. "If you need additional development resources for the expansion, my team is at your disposal. The marketing department wants to feature Community Connect in our next campaign," added the VP of Marketing. The human impact stories are exactly what we want to highlight about Horizon's mission. When the room had emptied except for Dion and Richard, the young man finally allowed himself to process what had just happened. "I still can't believe it," Dion said, gathering his presentation materials. 6 months ago I was just hoping for an entry-level position. Now you're exactly where you're supposed to be," Richard finished for him. "Where your talents and your heart can do the most good." Dion nodded, thinking back to that pivotal morning at the bus stop. "You know, when I missed that interview to help you, I thought I'd lost my one big chance. I never imagined it would lead to something even better." Richard smiled knowingly. Life rarely follows the path we expect. Sometimes the detours are where we find our true destination. He placed a hand on Dion's shoulder. "Your grandfather would be proud of you, son." The mention of his grandfather brought unexpected emotion to Dion's chest. "I hope so. I know so. Now how about we celebrate your promotion? I've reserved a table at that small restaurant near your mother's place, and yes, I've already invited her to join us." Dion laughed, not even surprised anymore by Richard's thoughtfulness. "She'll be thrilled. She still talks about when you came over for Sunday dinner last month." As they walked toward the elevator, Dion's phone buzzed with a notification from the Community Connect app. A new food distribution center had just been added to the system in his old neighborhood. He showed the screen to Richard. "It's working," he said simply. Richard nodded, his eyes reflecting the same satisfaction Dion felt. This is just the beginning. Outside the Horizon building, the afternoon sun illuminated the city streets where 6 months earlier, a young man in his best suit had made a split-second decision to help an elderly stranger instead of continuing on to a job interview. Neither of them could have known then where that simple act of kindness would lead, not just to a career opportunity, but to a purpose that would touch countless lives. As they stepped into Richard's waiting car, Dion thought about all the people who would benefit from Community Connect, families who would find resources they desperately needed, community organizations that would connect with those they aimed to serve, volunteers who would discover where their help was most needed. One small moment of compassion had created ripples that would spread farther than he could have imagined. And in that realization, Dayon found a profound sense of gratitude for missed buses and split grocery bags, for second chances and unexpected mentors, and for the winding, unpredictable path that had led him exactly where he needed to be. "Ready?" Richard asked as the driver waited for their direction. Dayon smiled, looking ahead to the future that was unfolding before him. "More than ready,"